I'm Doug MacKenzie.
And I'm John Ward.
And we're the co-hosts of the ABCs of IBC podcast.
Come join us as we share our unique perspective on the infinite banking concept as the creator, Nelson Nash, intended.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going, John?
Are we recording?
We're recording.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You didn't see the 3, 2, 1?
No, because I didn't have it on that tab.
Okay.
I had got so ready today that I logged in and then I went out and ran an errand. And then when I got back, I started doing some work and then we started talking. And then, yeah, you beat me to the 3, 2, 1. So
Nice. Well, at least I won something today.
You won today. Yep. All right. So you've got a topic you want to talk about.
Yeah, I've seen this this come up a bunch lately when talking with clients. I get this question about dumping. We'll hear the terminology a lot of a dump in. So I get the question of, can I throw in an amount of money that's oftentimes vastly larger than the annual premium in the first year? And will that basically kind of supercharge my policy? And I'm sure you've heard that before, John, too.
Oh, yeah. It comes up a lot. And I just say it's not the most efficient way to do it.
Right. And that's why we wanted to talk about that, because so John and I are IBC practitioners through the Nelson Nash Institute. So we try to practice IBC the way that Nelson would have practiced IBC. And if anybody's seen the picture of our podcast, you'll see Nelson in the middle there. But there's a lot of noise out there that is not the infinite banking concept, but that likes to brand itself as the infinite banking concept. And that is really focused around kind of viewing this whole process as an investment with a very short-term mentality. And I don't like it when people, kind of just use the platitude, think long-term. So we're going to talk about why we don't think that it necessarily makes sense most of the time to do a first-year premium dump. Now, that being said, I think we can both agree, John, that there are times when it does make sense to do that, or when it could be an okay decision for someone to do that. But we're going to kind of walk through why it's not quite as magical as most people think, and what we think are some better options that could be pursued.
Yeah, and maybe before, again, I could be missing some of the other reasons, but I think, people find infinite banking out in the world of real estate investing. We've mentioned that in the past, and, it's being basically sold that you're going to, if you dump in money, that you have a big chunk. Maybe you just sold a property, maybe you flipped a property, whatever, sold it too. But, hey, you could front load this policy and put in a lump sum and then just do your annual premiums. Some people aren't even thinking in terms of annual premiums. And that, again, that's the most efficient way to do it. They're thinking, hey, I've got 100,000. I've got some money. I just want to stick it in there, and I really don't want much of a annual premium because I don't know where that's coming from. And so that's where it comes from. And it's funny. When you were talking earlier about the Nelson Nash Institute, I don't know why, but it sounds. Some people will say, "Oh, that's a cult." That institute. But we became infinite banking concept practitioners through the Nelson Nash Institute because we believe in the concept. And so we wanted people that want to practice what Nelson talked about in many videos and in his books. And we wanted to do it the right way. And effectively, if you find us through the Institute, you find Doug or I, for example, and you come through as somebody requesting an inquiry from us, it does go through their system, and they literally can make us, they can get rid of us as practitioners, right? Because we don't follow the practice, that we said we were going to. We're basically, and hey, there is some flexibility. We can dump in a lump sum. That's not against Nelson's idea, but the idea of not being thinking long term with annual premiums, for you not to be, it would be wrong for us not to tell you that this is going to cost you more, believe it or not, to dump in a lump sum in the first year and then just do your annual premiums. If you really, really, really want to get it into the policy, we can do that. Mm-hmm. But I could show you the numbers and say, this is going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars to do it that way, as opposed to doing it a different way. And and when you see those numbers, you're probably like, hey, nobody told me that, right? They just, like you said, platitudes on the internet and videos and so forth, and not.
Well, and the experience that I've run into a lot too is I will see clients that come along with an illustration from someone else that's not a practitioner via the Nelson Nash Institute, and they have an illustration like that that's like, front loaded, super short term payment period, like really extreme split on the base and rider, PUA rider, and they've never really been shown anything else. And same thing. It's nice to walk someone through and show what that looks like long term, to where they actually prioritize paying premium over a longer period of time, like a higher consistent amount of premium.
Yeah.
And I mean, John, I'll let you talk about this because you were kind of going into this right before the call.
Yeah.
The reasons why that is, and we've said this before, there's no free lunch in life insurance. And again, kind of another platitude, but it's true. You can't do something without having some sort of other effect. And so you're going to throw a bunch of money. And by the way, when we say a premium dump, it's basically the insurance company is allowing you to put in extra money into the PUA rider the first year, and so that's what we mean when we say that. And so in order to do that, if you've listened to our episodes about the modified endowment contract, there needs to be an addition of term insurance, a death benefit, to account for that, but it doesn't just automatically go down in the second year. So, John, I will let you take it away since you have examples.
Okay, well, hang in there. Buckle up, everybody.
Buckle. I'm buckled.
So I'll use an example, and of course, it's just an example. But let's take a 50-year-old male who says, I'm comfortable with $20,000 a year in annual premiums. I just feel like I have the budget, so to speak. I'm just comfortable with that. And so, okay, but, I have this money and I'd like to get that money into this policy. Can I do that?
Like additional money?
Yeah, I've got this money sitting on the sidelines over and above this money that I know I can fund the policy through regular income and cash flow and whatever. But I also have this lump sum of money sitting over, and I don't know what to do with it, and so can I get it into the policy? And as I said earlier, I would say, well, you can, but it's not the most efficient way to do it. So as Doug just said, when we're trying to make sure we give you the ability to put money into the optional amount, the paid up additions amount, that we don't run into the modified endowment contract and go over that line, which then makes you lose the tax advantages of having this policy. Now it's all taxable and there's no way of turning back. So we make sure that we have enough insurance so that we have the room, because otherwise we're overpaying, and that's where we get into trouble with the modified endowment contract. So we have this term insurance that we add to the whole life portion, and that will eventually term out, or it can be converted, all that kind of stuff. But let me stay on task here. So if you were to take that 50-year-old male who says, I have 20,000 a year to put in, and I have this 50,000 of lump sum, and I run the numbers, I see that for example, in that case, that annually for 30 years, you're going to pay roughly $3,000 a year in term. That's part of that. That's where some of the money is going in the annual premium. But if I'm sorry, let me backtrack on that so I get the numbers right. In that case, it's a little over 4,000. But even though you don't have 70,000 to say, I'm going to put 70,000 in a year, I'm going to make, but what if I did? What if I ran it so that I could put 70,000 in every year and I had the income to cover it? That one, the term insurance for 30 years is a little less than 3,000. So if I decide that I wanted to do it that way, I'm just comparing. It's 70,000 in the first year in both policies. And it's going to cost me $1,000 more for 30 years. So $30,000 to be able to drop that 50,000 in just one time.
Right.
That should kind of...
That's the same kind of result I see every time I look at that with somebody. And it's like, okay, you want to take a look at that? We'll take a look at it. But that's a great example. And that's like a pretty extreme example too.
And, I also ran it, because the reason I ran it at 50 years old was because, well, a lot of more 50-year-olds, probably not the 40s and 30s, don't have it. But I'm just saying, more apt to be somebody who has a lump sum, that somehow they came across it, either in their own doing or it was, an inheritance or what have you. So I ran it at 100,000. The same thing happens. And that's what's crazy, right? Until you see the numbers, you'd say, that doesn't even sound like it makes sense.
Right.
But that's how
it's because the policy needs to accommodate that additional premium. So it needs to basically allow more room so that it can pass the 7-pay test.
Yeah. And it doesn't really want you to drop in that pile of cash. It wants, right, the steady cash flow. And that is more effective in the growing of the policy. Now, I would recommend to people, if they said this, I have 20,000 to put in it annually and I have the 50,000, is we have something called the premium deposit fund. And I said, yes, better than putting it in the bank is to put it into the premium deposit fund that's part of this policy and just have the money drawn out. Or I say to the person, well, we want to average as much as we can fully paid up. So for the first 7 years, because that averaged amount is what you can put in going forward on the PUA part of it, the optional amount. So I would say, well, let's divide 50,000 by 7. And I'd say roughly, 7,000. So I'd say, well, your annual premium, you're probably going to be comfortable with 27,000. And then put the rest into your premium deposit fund, right? So now you get 23,000. Or you can say you still have your 20 plus now I put in another so that I could have 43 instead of 53, instead of 50, put that into the premium deposit fund. Now I have almost 2 years worth of premiums sitting there ready to pay. Not quite, but
Yeah, and then you can essentially start also saving up for future premiums that way. And I think
yep.
that's exactly what every situation that I've looked at with that, it makes more sense to, again, using your example, if somebody's like, hey, I can afford $20,000 a year, but they want to throw in 50 in the first year, it's always going to make more sense to work with that person and say, well, would you be comfortable paying 30, especially if you could cover the first few years of premium and then start to save up for premiums at that point? And the answer is almost always yes, or 27. But it's going to allow for much stronger policy growth over the long term. You're going to be paying a lot less in term costs. And setting a policy up that way is a lot more consistent with the type of infinite banking that we want to be practicing that's talked about in Nelson's book, because he does talk about thinking long term and funding. And in all of his examples, he uses funding for 4, 5, 6 years. And I think it's important to not get hyper focused on the noise that's out there that tells us that we need to just be like slamming as much money into these things as quickly as possible, because that's not the point. This is a slow and steady game. It's never meant to be like put something in, like jam as much in as quickly as you can just to take it right out. Sure, you might have a lot of cash value available in like the first year, but how are you looking 10, 20 years out? Are you able to pay in for a long time? Are you overpaying on term? These are things that the folks that, you see these things from on YouTube and God, where's the other app that this is really popular on? I'm drawing a blank. It's the Chinese app that everybody has. Do you know what I'm talking about, John?
I'm talking about what kind of app?
It's the social media app.
Oh,
I'm going to drive myself
like
nuts.
Zoom, but
no,
I don't know.
My God. It's the most popular app.
Oh, you're talking TikTok?
TikTok.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
sorry. Yep.
No.
Yeah, I'm trying to
I was
remember
mad at myself there. I
what
was like,
apps
oh
does
my
China
God.
own?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that those things are very popular, like on TikTok, on YouTube. We see this a lot, and it's noise. It's noise because when you look at it and you break it down, just like John did, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
For most people in most situations, and people think that they're going to be achieving something with it that they're not, because they heard something in a quick snippet. They don't understand it past that very surface level. And so that's what we're here to do, is to break that down with people and say, okay, well, what does that look like? And what does it look like to do something like this? And I've never had a situation where someone has said, okay, yeah, I wanted to go do the dump in, because it doesn't, when you can actually break it down, it doesn't make sense.
Well, yeah. And, honestly, it's surprising when, well, I shouldn't be really surprised, but you're more apt to do that when you're a new practitioner, to go along with somebody, because you don't know what you don't know, and then when you eventually know it, you're like, oh, that wasn't the best. I have some clients who did some lump sum, and because they were comfortable with it, and I didn't have really a good rebuttal at the time, right? To say, well, I shouldn't say rebuttal, but really just food for thought. You'd think that the more seasoned practitioner would be able to explain this, but there's a lot of people out there that kind of really got their start because of Nelson Nash and the infinite banking, and then went their own separate way and did their own spin on it. And I think both of us, we've been in sales throughout our lives, in those kinds of roles, but I bet you're really not a sales, like you're not, pounding people, and I certainly don't.
No, never.
And I don't like the world, especially after all these years of being bombarded by it. Is, to your point, it's more of the classic sizzle, right? It's like, whoa, look at the, and it's snippets on TikTok and other social medias, right? It's not, and hey, I'm not saying I don't fall into that to try to get somebody's attention necessarily, but it's if you do only the sizzle and then you never tell them, but I just want you to know this, right? That this is not the best way to do this infinite banking concept or to do your banking through these types of policies, whether you call it infinite banking or never even mention that term, or you're really showing them how they can get money out. That's the reason people are dumping in lump sums. They're not dumping in lump sums because they're trying to get more life insurance. They're trying to see what their cash value is going to be and can I go leverage it. And that's not the worst thing. It's like, yeah, sure, of course we want you to go off and leverage it, but know that there's, as you said, there's consequences to it. And if you're okay with the consequences, then okay, have at it. We're not here to say, no, we won't do it for you.
Exactly.
But if you don't know, it's just wrong to not at least share it with you that there's probably a better way to do it. And well, there is a better way to do it. So
yes, there is a better way to do it. And there's always extenuating circumstances or kind of unique situations where, a larger dump in or a very short pay policy makes sense for somebody. But for the majority of people that I work with, having something with steady payments that's payable for a long time makes the most sense. And that is typically what we want to steer people towards, just because it's the best avenue for them to practice the infinite banking concept. And I think it makes sense to come back to this constantly, because the main purpose of the infinite banking concept is not about building as much cash value as possible. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about creating your own banking system and divorcing yourself from the current banking system. That is truly what Nelson's book is about. And having a policy that's strong, and that allows one to pay into it for a long time and minimizes the costs necessary, associated of doing that is what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not picking on you, right? Because you please catch me when I say these words, right? But those are all the words that people think of as even the industry calls them, 10 pays or 20 pays or 30 pays, meaning annual premium payments. In the words cost, right? Because that alone blocks some people, right? I'm not right. It just does, right? We think, pay, cost. Yeah, it's lost in a sense, right? I might be getting something, I might be getting this, but that's why long term makes sense, because when are you not going to want to put money in your banking system? When would you ever say, I don't want to, unless, of course, you're thinking, well, I won't have any new money coming to me. I'll never have it, okay, well then, yeah. The policy can help pay for itself so you're taking, say $20,000 out a year, and maybe the premium at that time is 3,000, so you're netting 17. But when you retire and you're not working, but I say even when people have, $2,000 a month that's coming, maybe more with Social Security. So even at 62, 65, 67, 70, whatever. And right now, I mean, it's law that there's going to be a cost of living adjustment. So they're going to keep increasing that payment. That alone, you're going to have new cash flow, even if you weren't working a job. There's still money coming in. And where are you going to put it? And, there's very few times in life where you're not going to have some money continuing to come in. And by that time, yeah, your premiums are probably pretty small. Your term is ended, and depending on when you did the policy. So, just kind of reminding people that, yeah, this is something you want to do. This is like,
Yes.
it's not a like, oh gosh, I got to keep paying for all that
And we've
time.
talked about this a lot. It's like the mind shift that people gotta get across the hurdle there. But yeah, the whole goal is establishing something where you get to pay
Yeah.
premium as long as possible.
Yeah.
And then the funny thing that people overlook is that, and I would always recommend starting a policy that allows you to pay for as long as possible. You have a lot of options
Right.
to stop paying. If you can, you can offset premium with dividends later on. You can reduce pay up the policy, and we've talked about
Yeah.
all this
Yeah.
on previous
Exactly.
episodes.
No.
But you can't extend a policy if you set up like a 10 pay, or you set the policy up in a way that it can't accept max premium for more than like 7 years.
Yep.
And you decide that you want to pay more premium, but let's say you're uninsurable and you go to the insurance company and, hey, I'd really like to pay this for longer, please.
Yeah.
You can't.
You can't
It's
do
not.
it.
It's not possible.
Yes.
It's done. Contract was set up a certain way.
Yep.
So you're going into this restricting your ability to practice IBC.
I love it. That's so true. So, that's the truth of it all, is that keep your options open. And, you've got a lot of options if you open it up. But if you shut it down and narrow parameters, you can't then go back and ask for room to put more in. They're not going to do it. You might be able to do a new policy, like you said, if you're insurable or on somebody else, but not this one. And you've made this one so efficient.
It's better to have a policy paying out, long. I mean, it's getting a new policy. There's nothing wrong with that. But, policies become incredibly efficient once you go on for, a couple decades. And it's a shame for me, like if I look at, losing the ability to put money into something when it's giving me back, $2-3 for every dollar that I put in, why would I want to do that?
Exactly. So much more efficient. And, like, as you said, you get 20 years into it, and why would you want to take some of, and I'm looking at this one that was 70,000 a year, but don't, people, you don't have to feel like you got to do 70 to make this work. I'm just using that as an example. 20 years into it, right? You're putting in 70 and you're getting what? A dividend. You're getting a dividend of 65,000, over 65,000. And your net cash value is growing by 136,000. So why would you want to, for example, split that up and start all over to try to get this thing cranked up again, right? You want to do as best you can now. And then when the future comes and you have more, you can set up another one, right? But do all you can now. And, it's a nuanced thing that we help you walk through, and we're not pushing anybody to do things that they're uncomfortable with, but we do want you to think through it, and then you'll decide what you are comfortable with. But know that you want to do as much as you can.
Exactly. And, just know when you're out there and you hear things that a lot of it's noise. And we wanted to do this episode about policy dump-ins, premium dump-ins, because it gets hyped up a lot and we think that it's mainly missing the point and is largely noise and is not providing people with the benefits they think it might be, and may actually be a detriment to the long-term health of the policy.
I agree.
So,
well, thanks for this topic. And please, again, everyone, reach out, ask questions. Hopefully this is all helpful. I'm sure it is for some. And I think it was a great topic because it is very common. And if we didn't explain it well, please reach out, and happy to talk to you individually, or, as time goes, we'll try to get an understanding, across and articulated. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, Doug.
Thanks, John.
I'll talk to you next week. All right, buddy.
Sounds good.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the ABCs of IBC.
If you enjoyed listening, please hit subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen. It really helps. See you next week.
Bye.